بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I praise Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. I thank Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for the blessing of Al-Islam. I ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to send countless blessings and salutations on Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his family, his companions, and all of those who follow them in excellence into the day of judgment. I remind myself and I remind you with having the correct intention. That is, that we intend to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we seek the reward from Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ultimately seek Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. I remind myself and you of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which he said that the actions, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that the actions are by one's intentions. And every individual have what they intended. So I remind us to intend well. Mafud again. La ilaha illallah. Bismillah. Is the voice clear now? Is the voice clear? Inshallah. So I remind us, it's fixed now, right? I think so. La, not fixed. La ilaha illallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So it should be clear now, right? Alhamdulillah. Okay. So I remind us, inshallah, to just keep a sincere intention. And also want to keep in mind, because I was listening to the session prior to this, the early morning 6 o'clock session in the Essential Knowledge, that we are not scholars. I repeat, we are not scholars. Or sheikhs. Put that up, please. And I'm saying that for a reason. We are not scholars or sheikhs. Sheikhs is an English Arabic word. There's no such thing as sheikhs in Arabic. Shuyukh, mashayikh, right? But alhamdulillah. Why am I mentioning that? Because no one's into deluding you and tricking you. That's not, our intention. Our intention is to educate you and help you acquire the knowledge of the religion that we all need, not to make claims. And since we are not scholars and we are not sheikhs, that means we know less than you think we may know. And that means we'll be saying, I don't know, more than we'll be answering questions. And there is nothing wrong with that. So don't get discouraged when you ask a question and one of our teachers say, I don't know. We were taught and we were instructed by our teachers, some of them who were scholars and were sheikhs, to get used to saying, La adri, la a'lam, I don't know. Get used to that. And you should have it a lot. And sometimes you say, I don't know, just when you're not sure. Even if you're not sure, don't answer. Say, I don't know. Because you don't. You're not sure, so you don't know. And even in doing that, even reminding yourself in doing that, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. You're a human being. But if you get in the habit of saying, I don't know, in its proper place, your mistakes will be less, will be few. You're going to make some. And they won't be big mistakes. So from your side, as people who listen to us, don't push us to answer stuff we don't know. If someone says no, don't keep pushing. He said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll go ask. That's it. And leave it. Don't keep pushing. Don't do that. This is a bad habit of would-be students. They don't know how to stop at their limits. They keep pushing and pushing and pushing till you push someone to commit a sin. Don't do that. If someone says, I don't know, accept it. I don't know. Inshallah, we'll find out. So please have mercy on your teachers. Stop pushing people. Don't do that. This is a bad habit. I want what I want and I want it now. We're not children, we're adults. You can wait. I hate to sound so rough first thing in the morning, but it irritates me when I see bad manners from the student towards their teachers. Someone is sacrificing to help you and you want to put them in hellfire with your bad behavior. What do I mean, put them in hellfire? Because if they answer without knowledge and they make mistakes and they misguide people, it may be a cause of them to go into hell for that. So why are you pushing them there? Don't do that. Accept. Alhamdulillah. He said he don't know. Inshallah, he'll find out. If he doesn't find out, maybe later on as we study, it will come up and someone will teach us. It's fine. That's just a lesson. The first lesson we learned from our teachers, Kalimatul la a'lam nisfu deen. The word I don't know is half of the religion. Period. I don't know. It's fine. No one knows everything. Right? All right, with that said, so don't make every session of knowledge a session of legal judgments. A session of fatwa. That's for a mufti. None of us are muftis. That's not our job. We are teachers by necessity. Because we don't have scholars and shuyukh among us regularly, therefore somebody has to fill in and teach at least some essential knowledge so we know our religion. So everyone is acting as a teacher by necessity. Have mercy. Don't throw erasers at the substitute. Okay, alhamdulillah. So with that said, be merciful, please. Ar-Rahimuna yarhamuhum ar-Rahman. The merciful people, Allah, the merciful, will be merciful to them. So we left off talking about the section on Al-Aqidah, doctrine, in the book Risalat al-Mu'awwana. So we reached up to page number 41, where Sayyiduna al-Imam al-Haddad radiyallahu ta'ala anhu talked about al-Asha'ira or al-Ashariya and al-Maturidiyya being al-Firqat al-Najiyah, from among Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, that the Ash'aris and the Maturidis are the saved section among Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Now, yesterday, I talked about that Imam al-Haddad and others, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentioned whenever they talked about Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the people of the Sunnah and the majority of the Muslim nation, in the area of Aqidah, they mentioned two approaches or two madhabs, two schools of thought, the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school. This in no way means that everyone who is not Ash'ari or Maturidi is not a Muslim. Please, I need that to be understood well. What is understood is that the structure that was formulated and systematized by those two great Imams, Al-Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, and respectively, they died in the year 324 after Hijrah for Imam al-Ash'ari and 333 after Hijrah for Imam al-Maturidi. They were the ones who made an organized methodology for which the Muslims would know their tenets of faith in a structured manner. That was their function. So that methodology, after the 4th century Hijrah, became famous as Minhaj Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the path of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Later, different groups developed, and even in their time, because their formulation was a response for other sections who claimed to be Muslims who differed in tenets of faith, or some cases in tenets of faith, from Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So they responded to those by explaining the narrations from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the statements of the companions and those of the Salaf before them, of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, belief about the prophets, and as-sam'iyat, those things that related to the unseen or to the hereafter that was conveyed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that was their function. And that methodology was accepted by the vast majority of the Muslims in their time. And when I say the vast majority, that is represented by al-ulama, by the scholars, not common people. Because common people in traditional Islamic societies follow scholars of their time. Unlike today, where we have every common person who, I don't follow nobody, this is not the Islamic tradition. This is not how knowledge was preserved or passed on, by common people having an opinion in everything, even though they know nothing about the things they have opinion about. This is not the Islamic methodology. You had scholarship and you had common people. Those people who were common people follow the scholars. So the scholars who knew the Islamic sciences agreed on the methodology of those great imams, and they followed it and they taught it to the masses of the Muslims. And that's how the majority of the Muslims became known as Ash'ariyya or Maturidiyya. Later on, and this is expounding on this point because for us, this is probably the most essential matter of knowledge that we are confused in, that we need to clarify. Later on, groups developed after them that became prominent in our time. So after the time of Imam al-Ash'ari and al-Maturidi, which was in the 4th century, they dealt with different groups, and I won't go into all those groups. They're mentioned at the end of the creed of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, which we covered and we'll cover again, inshallah. He mentioned some of those groups, but among the main groups that affect us today, because there were many, but those ideas, they were refuted, and the Muslims have not clinged on them down to our day. But to our day, two groups have manifest themselves, or re-emerged, should I say, among the Muslim Ummah in a powerful way. They are al-Mushabbiha and al-Mujassima. And al-Mujassima. These two groups have re-emerged from the early days. They re-emerged, and today they are among the most significant opposition to Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, meaning al-Ash'ira wal Maturidiyya, in our time. So here I want to explain to you how they got to be where they're at today. In the time of Imam al-Ash'ari and Imam al-Maturidi, those Mushabbiha and al-Mujassima were from among the madhab in fiqh of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So they were in fiqh Hanabila, right? And a portion of those Hanabila, those Hanbalis in Iraq in the 3rd and 4th century, they were attached to the concepts of at-tashbih and at-tajsim, which is likening Allah to creation and giving Allah bodily attributes. Those people, Imam al-Ash'ari and Imam al-Maturidi, they were among those groups that they refuted. Besides al-Mu'tazila and al-Qadariyya and other groups, among them was al-Mujassima and al-Mushabbiha. And they wrote as the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, as opposed to those deviant Hanabila who were among al-Mushabbiha and al-Mujassima. And so that ideology of at-tajsim, giving Allah bodily attributes, or at-tashbih, likening Allah to the creation, was wiped out. And by the time of Sayyiduna al-Imam Ghazali, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, which was in the middle and the end, in the middle and the beginning of the 5th and 6th centuries, so the middle of the 5th century and the beginning of the 6th century, Imam al-Ghazali was born in the year 450 and he died in the year 505. By the time of al-Ghazali, al-Mujassima and al-Mushabbiha were basically wiped out. So those ideas were not prevalent. However, in the 8th century, which is around the year 700 after Hijrah, in Damascus, a person arose from among the Hanbalis, the same group in that same madhab, to re-emerge or to revive those concepts of the Mushabbiha and Mujassima in the 4th century. And that man, his name was Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah. Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah. And I want you to be aware of this. Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah, he died in the year 728 after Hijrah. It was him, and he was in fiqh, a Hanbali scholar, and he came from a notable family of Hanabila, those people who were great scholars in the school of fiqh and of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But Ibn Taymiyyah, who came after them, after his grandfather and who were great scholars, and he was a knowledgeable person. Don't let no one tell you because of their disdain for a person to take merit from them. You may not like a person, but you gotta admit merit is merit. He was very knowledgeable, but he deviated in many cases in tenets of faith and aqidah and al-fiqh and rules. So not just in aqidah, even in fiqh, there were many cases that he contradicted scholarly consensus. He contradicted scholarly consensus. However, it was this man, because of his fame and notoriety, who revived these concepts of the Mujassima and Mushabbiha from the 4th century. And in his time, the ulama of his time refuted him and clarified his points of misguidance. And ultimately, by the judgment of the chief justices of every school, the Shafi'i school, the Hanbali school, the Maliki school, the Hanafi school, all the chief judges of those came together to imprison him until he died, and he died in prison. And his students who followed him, they received a similar censoring and warning against. So after that time, basically the belief of al-Mujassima and al-Mushabbiha that reemerged with the advent of Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah was wiped out basically among the Muslims until we came to the 14th or 13th century, the end of the 13th century, with the coming of an individual by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. This individual, who died at the end of the 13th Islamic Hijri century, he revived those bad ideas of Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah in belief. And he came from a family of scholars as well. His father, Abdul Wahhab, his brother, Sulaiman, and the people of them, they were all Hanabila, and they were great scholars of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, but he deviated as Ibn Taymiyyah deviated before him, and he added issues that even Ibn Taymiyyah didn't have. So with the name of Abdul Wahhab, you will understand that his ideology became known as the madhab or the school of al-Wahhabiyya. Right? That's where it's taken from. In fiqh, they claim to follow the Hanbali school. In Aqidah, they follow the creed of al-Mujassima and al-Mushabbiha, which contradict the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, right? And here I was thinking about something last night. Sometimes my mind just goes because we're trying to convey things in a balanced way so that you understand, not in a fanatic way so you just blind follow. We don't need blind followers. We need people who know what they're talking about, right? So it doesn't help us just to be like, yeah, they were misguided and we don't know anything about what we're talking about. That doesn't help. He died 1200 and something, Hijra, in the late 1700s. I'll give you his exact date. It was the end of the 13th century, 12 something. Hold on one second. Allah. Excuse me, 1206. He died 1206 after Hijra, the beginning of the 13th century. 1206. So I put it. So his death was in the year 1206 AH. So you see, he came some 500 years after Ibn Taymiyyah, right? And his school didn't spread till later, not really well during his time. His ideas were really not accepted. And that Wahhabiyya movement, with the help of the British, became a means to undermine the Ottoman Empire in the Arabian Peninsula. So with the help of the British, they and the Saud family, they became strong and they came into power and they took over Western Arabia because they come from a Najd, the eastern part of Arabia. And they settled there and they, through the military campaigns against the Ottomans with the British and on the Arabian Peninsula, they end up in political power. That was the Saud family. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab supplied the religious ideology for the tribe of the Saud family, and the Saud family and the Wahhabi doctrine were merged together with the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So you have the rulership from the Saud family, the princes and the kings, and you have the scholarship from the family of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. That's why they say al-Sheikh, from the family of the Sheikh, meaning Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And that ideology is the same ideology in its foundational points as the creed of Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah, which was the same as the creed of al-Mushabbiyah and al-Mujassima in the 4th century. So that was always a creed that was opposed to the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. This is just historical facts. We don't have to talk about individuals, just to deal with history. This is true. So today, when you see a domination of this creed across the world through Saudi Arabia, which when they got oil money, that allowed them to buy and spread their doctrine. But through their military and their fighting, they took over Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, and established their Wahhabi ideology in those areas. So when you have people, and we know this from America, I just want you to study history. It's extremely important to understand these things so now you're not shocked. Because when you hear some things, you say, wow, man, how do you say that? Well, once you study history, you understand it. So prior to the advent of the Saudi Arabian kingdom on the Wahhabi doctrine, the practice in Mecca and Medina, for even during the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, was of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Ash'ariyah, Maturidiyah, all the way back. And there was always military fights and struggles that happened, but the main body of the Muslim scholarships in Aqidah were Ash'ari and Maturidi. In fiqh, one of the 4 madhabs, this was the way of Islam since the time of as-Salaf. But and you need to understand how politics play into the religious creed that is spread. Because in Saudi Arabia, all of you've been to Saudi Arabia, they're ran by that doctrine. So they're in military power, so they can force their doctrine on others, or they'll kill you or put you in prison. If you study how the Saud family and that Wahhabiyya doctrine became popular in Arabia, you see how many Muslims got killed and got slaughtered. That's just a fact, right? It wasn't they was doing preaching, they was killing people, considering them idol worshippers and grave worshippers, and slaughtered them. That's real. That's history. And I hate to come back to our thing. We understand this. Those original people who came to the United States from Europe, those first settlers, as they call them, they butchered and tortured the Native Americans, took the land, pillaged the land, and now they establish a government and say like that other people never exist. It's the same thing. It ain't like we don't know it. And when we study history, we'll see injustices. And that's why we as African American and Native Americans as well are still fighting for basic human rights after this oppressive government came and put things on the native people and established their own doctrine, established their own religion, took the religion of other people away. And this is It's not like we're not familiar with this type of behavior. The same thing happened in that Wahhabi Saudi Arabian movement. Why am I mentioning all these things? So that you have context to understand what we're talking about, right? That same movement went to Southern Arabia, to the land of Hadramaut, and they slaughtered people and destroyed people's graves and butchered the people. But alhamdulillah, Allah protected them, and eventually that movement couldn't settle there. So that's why even in the time of the grandson of Imam al-Haddad, if you read their writings, and sometimes all of us don't, not having access to Arabic as Muslims, it hurts because you don't get to really read history. They wrote against them. The stuff we say is light to what they were talking about. Like if you get to the level of the great grandsons of Imam al-Haddad and the great scholars who lived in the beginning of the 13th and the middle of the 13th and 14th centuries, if you see their writings, how they talked about the Wahhabiyya when they came to Hadramaut, you would be shocked. I mean, these things occurred, right? This is history. And we're not in the same position as everyone else. So we shouldn't act like everyone else. If I lived in Saudi Arabia, I might not have the fortune to say these things unless I wanted to be killed or put in prison, right? Because that's what's going to happen to you if you. So when you see people who have to be silent about matters, don't act like you don't understand reality. I mean, everybody's not a warrior. Everybody's not going to say, no problem. If I die, so what? I'm going to tell the truth. Not everybody's like that, right? Some people, they don't want to die. Some people don't want to be put in prison for 20 years and tortured, right? And you got to understand that. But if you're not in that condition, then you should speak about the truth. And maybe by you speaking the truth, one day you will relieve that person who's in that position who can't speak the truth. You might help them, because you change the environment, inshallah. But I just wanted to share that with you. So that same modern movement became what is known as Salafiyya. When it became, as its original name, known as Wahhabiyya, it changed to Salafiyya. And not everyone does the same thing, but the doctrine is the same. The doctrine is the same. And that doctrine is the doctrine that contradicts the doctrine of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Is just what I said. Is that clear? I'm going to stop to give you a chance to, because if you don't understand context, then the whole thing is just going to sound like a bunch of names and they're going to think we Crips and Bloods or something. It has nothing to do with that. It's actually trying to distinguish truth from falsehood. Once you distinguish, once you know history, now history has facts, right? You can't change history. How you understand the facts is another story, right? I'll give you something today. I was listening to something this morning, right? And I'm talking about speaking from our context, right? Seriously. Like, we got to learn. If we don't learn, we're going to be manipulated till we die. In generations and generations, we have to learn our deen seriously. And we have to learn our deen in a critical way, right? Where we don't openly blind trust anybody. Seriously, we can't. We can't afford it. We've done that and it hasn't worked well for us, right? So we got to examine things, but we got to learn so that we examine correctly. Like, we can't just half learn. We have to develop and develop and develop till we produce scholarship, and then we examine things from our own lens, not from the lens of someone else, right? So I was listening to a class in the science of hadith this morning. And I was listening to the teacher teaching the book And the teaching of the book had nothing to do with the book, right? Because the person didn't have mastery of the subject. But because of the popular trend, he had to teach the subject because he would lose his followers. But he, instead of just saying, this is not my field of study, he would go and pretend that that's his field of study. And here's my funny thing, and I'm listening to the explanation because I studied these type of books. I'm like, this is the worst explanation I've ever heard in my life. Right? Like, just, why don't you just leave that to someone else who know what they're doing? Right? Like, that's not your field. But in an interest, in an effort to keep followers, you go into something you shouldn't have went into. But those followers will come out and say, I studied such and such. I'm like, you didn't study that. Did you hear the explanation? And that's what people do. Instead of just saying, look, this is not my area, go to the specialist in this area. This is not my area, go to the specialist in that's what we should do. If you learn nothing from this class, learn to know what you know and what you don't know. And what you know, speak upon it. And what you don't know, say I don't know. Like, that's my point. But history is a great teacher. So now if you just understand from what I said, so when I said to you yesterday, give me from those ideas one chain of narration that goes back unbroken with the people who have the same belief. You can't. Why? Because these were deviant ideas that came at one point. They were wiped out. Then they reemerged. They were wiped out. And now we're living in basically the third resurrection of those ideas. That's the time we live in right now. And I'm assuming, safe to say, within the next 100 years, that stuff will be wiped out. But long as they have political power, it's going to take a little time. Because through political power, they maintain their doctrine. And that is changing slowly but surely. But that's a history lesson related to what we're dealing with. So when you hear us being more critical on the Wahhabi Salafi ideology, that is because that is the direct ideology that most of us are confronted with. There are other ideas, like there are the Shia who carry some Mu'tazila ideas or Qadariya ideas. However, most of us are not dealing with the Shia. Very few. The Shia are not really effective. Other groups are not very effective. So you speak about what you're dealing with. And what we're mostly faced with that is prominent in our areas is these ideas of al-Mushabbiha, al-Mujassima, the Aqidah of Ibn Taymiyyah, the Aqidah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in today's modern Salafi Wahhabi movement. That's what we're facing with. So we address what we're facing with. You know, that is the cancer that we deal with. So I'm not going to leave cancer and deal with the cut on my finger. That doesn't really bother. It's a cut. It needs to be treated, but it's not as severe as the cancer that I'm facing. So I have to deal with that. I hope you got my point. Is there any questions about what I just talked about? I'll pause for that because it's extremely important. Before I go on with what we're talking about here, you need to understand the context. That's why I mentioned these things. Is there any questions? Let me look. Related to exactly what I talked about. If I didn't talk about it, or it doesn't relate to what I talked about, let's save it for later, inshallah. I'll look. Allah, Ya Rabb. I'm just looking for if there was questions about what I mentioned. Yes, both his father, Sheikh Abdul Wahhab, and his brother, Sheikh Suleiman, and the scholars of his area, they refuted his idea. His brother wrote a book called As-Sawa'iq al-Ilahiyya fi Radd ala al-Wahhabiyya. His brother, Sheikh Suleiman ibn Abdul Wahhab, he wrote a book the lordly lightning or the godly lightning in refuting the Wahhabiyya. So his brother who lived with him called his group Al-Wahhabiyya. That wasn't something someone else made up. The people in his time, that's what they called them, Wahhabiyya. And that's evidence from the book of his brother, As-Sawa'iq al-Ilahiyya fi Radd ala al-Wahhabiyya. So they called them that. And that book is translated and available. I don't know where you can find it, but it is translated. And I don't, but as to where to find it, I don't know. I have the Arabic copy, but I don't know the English book where it's available. Not really. There are books, and I'll think of some and I'll share them with you later. But unfortunately, most of the books that I have that deal with that are in Arabic. But there are books. I'll have to get them and think about them and get them to you. Allah, that's it. The revision of history by the Saudi, that's a whole nother discussion, and inshallah in a future class we can talk about it. But I just wanted you to understand how those concepts in Aqidah, because that's what we're talking about, got to us today. So that's the route, that's their senate, that's their chain of narration. Inshallah, that book, The Confessions of a British Spy, is a book that talks about this issue. I don't know where to find that at either, but there is a book written like that. It talks about this issue. And there are many books, inshallah. We'll look to some that I think of and I'll share with you, inshallah. No, this concept has nothing to do with the sacredness of Mecca and Medina. The sacredness of Mecca and Medina remains sacred, no matter who's in charge. It's still Mecca and Medina. That's an opinion of mine. What is the bigger threat for African Americans, Wahhabis or Nation of Islam? For me, I think Wahhabis. I don't know a Muslim who's going to believe, that knows anything about Islam, that will fall for ideology of Nation Islam. I don't know anyone who would do that. Maybe they might have sympathy for them and try to twist their ideas, but the Wahhabi thing, that's the danger. Why? Because it appears to be Sunni, and they call themselves Sunni and Ahl Sunnah, and they all say they're on Quran and Sunnah, and they're giving this bad belief. So if you ask me, my personal opinion, there's no danger greater than the danger of Wahhabism facing us today. Not atheism, not secularism, though it is a problem. Now remember the context that, let me stop. Wait a minute, that's not true. Let me rephrase that, back up. In some environments, Wahhabism is irrelevant. So I've spent a lot of times in the suburban communities as a teacher. They don't have Wahhabis. They are basically Sufi, maybe deviant Sufism is their problem, maybe secularism, liberalism, and feminism and all that other stuff is affecting them. So they may be Ahl Sunnah, but they got all this other stuff from studying in Western universities. So that may be a problem for them. But for the African Americans, as you mentioned, we don't have all those issues. Our issue, Wahhabism in the name Salafism. That's our problem. If I think the confusion in our deen for us is that, by far, and I challenge anyone on that idea. Because most of the people, unfortunately, when they come to Islam in the African American community, by default, they got Wahhabi books in front of them. All you got to do is go to the bookstore and look at the titles of the books and you'll see it. Wherever they're going to get knowledge from, go to it. Wherever they're going to go on the internet and they're going to try to seek knowledge, that's why you have all these famous speakers, even today in our masjid, which is a strict Sunni, Ash'ari, Shafi'i, Sufi masjid. There's people still playing Wahhabi tapes. Come through the masjid, but what are you doing? Right. I just like what he said. You know what I mean? It happens, you know. So I believe that's our biggest problem. That's my personal opinion. It don't have to be true, but I would support it and back it up by facts. Tell you, and that issue, the main issue is Aqidah. There are other issues in the rules of religion too that are different, but the big problem is Aqidah, and we have to fix that. Dad, I didn't mean to take up the whole time. Man, time flies. So let's go back to our text so that I do read from the book. I didn't mean to take out it. Time just goes fast. So on page 41, Imam al-Haddad, he said, every believer must protect his faith by learning the creed of one of the Imams who are incontestably worthy of respect and well-grounded in knowledge. So what happens? Those great Imams of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they wrote treaties or texts, summarized texts in Aqidah, so that the common person would know what is the belief of Islam and what is the belief of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So Imam al-Haddad said that we must protect our faith. How are we going to do that? By learning a creed, the Aqidah of one of the Imams who are worthy of respect by the whole nation. We agree upon them, and who are well grounded in knowledge. And then Imam al-Haddad explains one of those Imams. He said, and I can see none clearer, more comprehensive, and free from suspect and misleading things than that of the Imam al-Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him. So Imam al-Haddad recommends to us, encourages us to learn the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, which is Al-Firqatun Najiyah, the saved group, who are the Asha'ira and Maturidiyya, from the creed written and authored by Imam Hujjatul Islam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And he said it's clearer and it's free from any doubtful things. It's comprehensive. You can follow, you read that, you learn that, you study it with a teacher, you'll know the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. He said this is to be found in the first chapter of the volume on the foundations of belief in the Ihya, which is his book, Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the sciences of religion. The first chapter of that section, it deals with Usul al-I'tiqad, the foundations of belief. He said, should you wish for more, then look into the Jerusalem Epistle, Risalatul Qudsiyya, in the third chapter of the same book. So here Imam al-Haddad recommends for us to learn the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah by reading the creed authored by Imam al-Ghazali, which is contained in his book Ihya Ulumuddin. So Ihya Ulumuddin is a big 4-volume book, but I recommend for you this summarized text of the Ihya of Imam al-Ghazali. It's a summarized book. And the second chapter of this book deals with Aqidah. And it is a summary of the lengthy discussion that Imam al-Ghazali had in the original. So the Ihya in this book, you have that section that Imam al-Haddad talked about summarized. So you can find this at the Masjid bookstore. Here, I want to highlight something because someone mentioned it to me yesterday. We have a lot of challenges to do as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. There are a lot of challenges we have. One of them is to produce well-translated texts, which is a challenge, right? So all of our books, or at least 90% of the translated books, have translation errors. Why? because most of the time the person who translates is not a specialist in the Islamic science that he may be translating in. So he doesn't understand that sometimes this term should not be used. It's just a translation. Though he himself may have the correct belief, but he may not know how to articulate that outside of the Arabic language. So this is problematic. So what happens is sometimes in the translation, you're going to read stuff from your side of understanding it's not befitting. But from the translator, what he believes and understands may be different from what you're understanding from that. So why am I saying this? Even when I encourage you to read a book, you should still learn with a teacher who's going to clarify. That's why I read books with you, so that I make sure that those translation errors don't stick with you, that you can fix them, that you learn. So even if you have a book, books do not talk. You need living teachers. Please highlight that. Books do not talk. You need capital N, capital E, capital E, capital D. You cannot do without a teacher. The teacher is going to clarify those mistakes. Even in Arabic, books have mistakes. Books have errors. You can have the best book in the world, and you're still going to find errors, mistakes. Nothing is perfect. So you need the teacher to clarify that. So don't think if I learn Arabic, the book's not going to have a mistake. Yes, it is. Books in Arabic have mistakes in belief, in wrong expressions. It happens. That's why you need living teachers. So keep that in mind. So if you read something that you attend the classes and you learn bitalaqi with the teacher, you say, oh, this is a mistake. It has to be, because we know this is not befitting of Allah. You ain't going to know that if you don't attend sessions and sit with teachers, right? So you need to do that. A book doesn't replace a teacher. A book is an aid to gathering information that you further clarify with a living teacher. You need living teachers. To this day, we still have living teachers. We read stuff and we got to go back to our teachers and clarify it, because there is a portion that you have to read on your own. No teacher has the time, especially today in our time, to sit with you and read every single line of every single book. That just, no one has that kind of time. So what do you learn? You learn the foundations of belief. You learn what is correct. And when you read, you will able to recognize things that are questionable, things that are obvious mistakes. And then you take that back to your teachers and they clarify them. That's simple. That's the path. But the idea that every teacher's going to go over every single book in the whole library and fix is fantasy and imagination. No one has the time to do that, right? It's impossible. It cannot be done. But what can be done is setting principles by which you educate people how to acquire knowledge. So I'm going to give you steps to acquire knowledge. Number 1, reading. Number 2, acquiring knowledge at the hands of a living teacher, right? So you have reading books, reading on your own, acquiring knowledge at the hands of living teachers, reviewing, teaching. When you have all those 4 things, you will find that you understand the material. And there could be other steps to that, but basically 4. You read on your own, you read books, so you become familiar with the subject matter. While you're reading, you're also attending the lessons with living teachers. So it's talaqi, you're sitting face to face with your teacher. Well, right now we got virtual, and the teacher is explaining and clarifying things, and you're having discussions. So you're learning what is befitting, what is not befitting, how, right? Then you're reviewing with your classmates, with the teacher, you review, and then you're actually teaching. When you're teaching the material, you'll get a better grasp of it. And then after those processes, you'll find that you'll have some kind of comprehensive understanding of things. It's work. But the idea, I keep telling y'all, no microwave Islam. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. You got to study. I'm talking about decades. I'm not talking about 4 or 5 years. Decades of studying to get this stuff where I ain't talking about practicing your basic religion. I'm talking about getting where you have a firm understanding of Islamic sciences. But if you just want to pray and fast, you can learn that in a month. Pray. This is what you got to do. This is obligatory. This is recommended. This is an invalidator. This is a condition. And you're done for your basics. But if you want to go further than that, it takes time. And if you want to have any level of mastery, it takes more time. Much more than any of these Western sciences before you become proficient in anything. Now, so I hope, so that is for the, yeah. But I'm warning you, there are some translation issues in all of the books that we see. Very few that we see that are published in English that don't have errors that need to be corrected. So the way you find that is by constantly being with living teachers, and they'll correct these things. It's not a big deal, right? It's not a big deal. You're in necessity mode, right? I remember when I first started learning. This is a story. When I first started learning, my teachers were extremely strict. Man, were they strict. And I look back today and I look at that strictness. I got the point, but that was so severe and unnecessary. I mean, like, I got the point. I got the intent. But what I discovered as I got older, y'all not even doing that. Because it's impossible. You would narrow someone till they will never grow. And I know some people who learn with similar teachers than me and a similar methodology, and they still to this day, they don't have a grasp of Islamic sciences because of it. They were so narrow and so strict that they didn't learn, right? So they spent 20 years, some 30 years, and they still don't even know the basics of Islam, except one book or 2 books that are summarized books. That's all they know. They know that well, but when they learn that, they didn't learn exceptions. They can't explain differences of opinion. They don't have any of that knowledge. Why? Because of the strictness. And it hurt them. So today, when as the world expand and knowledge expand, they can't hang. Now you're living in a global environment where you ain't the only kid on the block. People studied overseas. People learned a lot of stuff. Saudi trained some of these guys that graduate to Medina, and you can't handle them because they know Arabic, they know many sciences that you didn't learn because you was in that box. When Ahl Sunnah has that, but as you expand, as you learned about more teachers, you can educate yourself. So strictness always, I got the point in it, but it always ain't beneficial. Teach a person to think and they could survive. But if you just put a battery in someone's back and wind them up and tell them to go, when they get into a difficult situation, they're going to crash because you didn't tell them how to think. You didn't tell them how to examine. You didn't tell them principles by which they know how to function in the world. That's why we lose our children. We tell them, you got to be a Muslim, you got a deen, and this, and this, and this, and never tell them how to deal with the world. So when they go out in the world, they get clobbered, they get crushed, because you never taught them how to critically think and examine the world within their religious principles. It's the same thing in seeking knowledge. It's the same thing. So let us not be like that. Let us expand within the principles and then learn how to do it. Because ultimately, one day you got to lead. Never forget that. One day, right now, you're sitting here as a student. One day, you must become a teacher. So if I don't teach you how to deal with the realities you're going to face, you're going to be a horrible teacher. You're not going to be able to handle it. So as soon as a Salafi Wahhabi come to you and quote a couple verses and you don't understand Islamic principles of belief and history and all that, that stuff going to sound impressive to you because you didn't learn. But if we teach you how to think critically, to learn, to examine, tell you about scholars, tell you about different books, tell you about different sciences, tell you how the sciences relate, how they mix, things of that, how they are intertwined. Then some stuff, when you listen to it, like, man, that doesn't even make no sense. What are you talking about? And most of that stuff they say don't make any sense for someone who understands. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even sound impressive once you know. It's like, come on, really? But that's from critical thinking. And we must do that as a people. Because I'm telling you, no one's going to do it for us. Forget about it. No one cares enough. I'm being honest with you. I'm not speaking from just my mind. I've been around a long time. No one cares enough. We have a lot of things to face. And if Islam is going to be our way out, we better learn Islam well. We better learn it well, not haphazardly. We have to learn our deen. And we have to pass it on to our children. Sometimes I gotta pull myself back because it pains me, man. Because we could be so further ahead, but you know, mashallah can. What Allah willed to be shall be, and what He didn't will to be, it will not be. But we do have to make an effort. So don't take it personal. I remember there was a time when everything was personal for me. I know for myself. I hated Wahhabis and Salafis with a passion. But it's what I saw with my eyes. I didn't see what the average person seen. I seen bloodshed and murder and bombings and killing, and I've seen too much. So my eyes see it totally different. But that doesn't relate to us. And I had to come down to realize you're not in the same environment. You're in a different environment, different people. They're not the same. Even though they're talking the same ideas, they're not the same people. You know, so don't apply what is one place in another place. It's not the same. Even if it looks the same, it's not necessarily the same, right? But so these are your people. They're not your enemy. They're just confused. Yeah, they may be your enemy. These people are confused and they need your help. They're not your enemy, right? Even though they got on the clothes of your enemy, it's not your enemy. He don't even know the clothes he got on. He doesn't realize it. So you got to go help him. Don't treat him like an enemy. So when we're dealing with our people who happen to be influenced by that doctrine, we got to have a different attitude. They just don't know. And your job is to help them. They don't know. It's a default position. And they're looking at you like, why are you so hostile towards me? I'm Muslim, right? Yeah, because they don't know. Seriously, that's what was there. I'm trying to be a Muslim. I want to make it to Jannah. That's what they told me Islam was. What you want from me? I don't have no other resources, and no one else is telling me. I don't know all that stuff you're talking about. All I know is I'm a Muslim. I pray. I go to the bookstore. I get some books. I go to the masjid. That's what the guy is saying. That's it. I know nothing else. Now, when I get educated and I know more, maybe I can think differently. But right now, that's all I got. And your harshness towards me ain't helping it none. Right? That's just me talking to myself. Don't worry about it. All right, let me take some questions. La ilaha illallah. Did we get any questions that we didn't get? Allah. I wish we had more time. Seriously, we just don't have the time we need to do all we need to do. Right? You got to try to hit it as you can because we don't have a lot of time. We're not in the mode of spending hours learning. I would love to. She needs to learn. I got your point, but she needs to learn. She had good intentions, but not knowledge with the intentions. She needs to learn, and may Allah reward her for her attempt, but she still needs to learn. She could have done it in a much better way. But she does what she, if you know her background and where she learned, you understand. But she could have done it in a better way that would have been more effective. But her point is well understood, but that's just not the way you go about it. So that's not the way we need to approach this situation. Though I agree with the intent, but the approach and the outcome is not what we're looking for. What books? What's wrong with the books? What books? Oh, Aqidah, and what specific? Exactly. Sometimes, in terms of the Wahhabiyya Salafiyya movement, what is wrong in belief is the attributing attributes of creation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether literally or in meaning. Because sometimes they'll say something about Allah and they'll say Allah does not resemble in his creation, but what they said, the meaning entails resemblance to the creation, right? So either way, these things are not befitting. So ascribing to Allah limbs, directions, locations, movement, rest, all of those are not befitting. So sometimes they explicitly say that, which is kufr to say that. And sometimes what is meant by that is that, and that is wrong. So in both cases, it is rejected. So sometimes that belief reaches the level of kufr, disbelief. And sometimes it reaches the level of vile innovation, al-bid'atu shani'ah, right? In any case, whether it is kufr or bid'ah, it is rejected. It is not something we can accept. So we don't have to get into hair splitting about individuals. Once we know these creeds are invalid, we don't accept them and we reject whoever carries them, and that's that, right? But if you want a hair split, you can do that all day. Well, is it kufr or not? Even if it's not kufr, do we accept? No. So why are we discussing that? If it's kufr and we want to avoid it, even if it was innovation and we weren't sure it reached the level of kufr, we should avoid it anyway. So why are we splitting hairs on that issue? It is something that is against the belief of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. That's sufficient. If you understand what I mean. I had a discussion with somebody about that. They want to get in an argument or whether you make takfir on someone who has a bad belief or not. All right, let's put that issue to the side. Is that a bad belief? Yes. Should we accept it? No. Okay, that's the point. As for the individual, leave his affair with Allah. We don't even got to talk about him. Get the point. Is it permissible to believe that Allah is in heaven? No. So therefore, that's the point. That's the point. It's not permissible. For all our purposes, we don't want to fall into bad belief. That's it. Allah mawjudun bila makan. Allah exists without a place. Khalas, that's it. That is the belief of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. We don't got to keep going into splitting hairs about individuals or groups. That's not the belief of Ahl Sunnah, no matter who carries it. Doesn't matter, if you understand my point. So this is the issue of belief in these issues. Now, other issues, there are more issues, but they're side issues. They're not the main problem. Go ahead. Almost every, you mentioned about a week ago, the Wahhabism are tampering, I think that's what you mean, with known classical books. Could you mention known which ones? Oh, too many. Every book that they touch, they tamper with. So like, pick any book. Fathul Bari of Ahmed ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. most of the books that you see, those books in Arabic I'm talking about, the book Fathul Bari has the addition of the notes of Bin Baz. There was the former Mufti of Saudi Arabia, and he tampers with that book all through it. So that's one of the most famous commentaries on Sahih al-Bukhari. They tamper with it. You'll get any book they touch, any book they edit, they touch in the Islamic library, they put their stuff in it. That's any book they touch. Very few books do they leave alone. That's rare. And I'm talking about in Arabic, and I'm not talking about English. In Arabic, sometimes they add. I remember I was reading one of their books. It wasn't their book. They take original books and then they edit it and they put their notes and they publish it, right? So the book Al-Jurumiyya in Arabic grammar, right? It starts Al-Kalam, right? Speech. Huwa laftun murakabun mufidun bil-waj'i, right? It is words that is compounded, that has a meaning in the Arabic language, right? That's what a speech is. Word that is combined, composed, right? That has a benefit when you finish saying it in the Arabic language, right? So that's an Arabic rule. When we want, what is kalam in Arabic? It's a bunch of words, is a word put together that when you finish, it has a meaning. It benefits in the Arabic language, right? That's kalam, that's speech. The guy puts kalam, it is harf wa sawt, that it is the kalam of Allah, wal iyadu billah. He said the speech of Allah is letters and sound. It has nothing to do with what you're talking about here. But he put that in the book, right? That is not from the original author, has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but you want someone to have this bad aqidah. So you use the word kalam that's talking to them in the Arabic language in grammar to use it for your false, invalid aqidah. Example. So it's Arabic, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Why are you putting your bad belief in the book? Because they're trying to indoctrinate the people. By the way, according to the scholars, the kalam of Allah, of Ahl Sunnah, is not is not harf or sawt, is not letters or sounds. Harf, huruf, wal aswat, sifat, min sifat al makhluqeen. They're from the attributes of created things, not Allah. You can't attribute Allah with letters and sounds and a voice. But he put it in the book of Arabic language. So a person is just going to learn Arabic and he's going to learn Wahhabi creed. But it's the most famous book for beginners in Arabic language. So that's my point. If you understand when I say tampering with books. And by the way, the author who wrote the book was a Sufi, an Ash'ari. So that shows you how dangerous it gets. The author of the book was Ash'ari and Sufi and Maliki, right? And the Wahhabis put their notes, give their aqidah, and teach it to their people. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But they won't tell you all that when they give you the book. They just give you the book and say, see, we studied this. This is kufr. You studied what? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. La hawla wa la quwwata. Strictness, no, not just memorization. I mean, strictness has its points, but what I'm saying is you got to be able to see beyond the apparent, right? So I give you an example. The rule is, and this is a harsh example, the rule is women should cover, right? Boys and girls shouldn't commit fornication, right? That's the rule. Haram, don't do it. Okay, you get your young girl who goes to high school now and she's struggling with hijab. You get your kid who goes into the high school, they're struggling with their sexuality. Now the girl starts sneaking around, taking off her hijab when you're not around. The kids get a boyfriend, a girlfriend, and sneaking on the phone, all right, they know the rule. Now, how do you deal with the reality on the ground? Strictness can be, I told you don't take off your hijab. That might work, and it might not. It might backfire on you, right? So now, application. How do I deal with the rule and the reality that I'm faced with? That's your challenge, right? And there is a rule. You don't forbid a wrong that's going to lead to a greater wrong. Most people don't know that. They just think if it's wrong, forbid it. No, not in every case. It's unlawful to forbid a wrong that you know is going to lead to a greater wrong. So you got to be to distinguish. They said the wise person is not the one who can distinguish between good and evil. The wise person is the one who can distinguish between the best of two goods and the worst of two evils. That's a little bit more. Not just I know what is good and bad. Okay, what's the best of the goods that are available and what's the worst of the evils? The best of the good, so we do the best, and the worst of the evil, so we avoid the worst. And we don't fall into the worst of the evils. So you said I'm going to forbid evil, but it's two evils available. One is less than the others, and you go fall into the worst one. That's because you don't have wisdom and you don't know how to distinguish, right? I'll give you a jail story for those people who know about prisons. In the prisons, we taught in the prisons for years, right? And we wiped Wahhabism out of the prisons, basically. In the federal system, it was basically wiped out through the country. Wahhabis were like almost obsolete, especially in terms of leading the community. So when we stopped being in the prisons, someone else went. And automatically, they started to make in-car or censoring everything they saw. And I told the person, I said, listen, don't do that. Just teach the people. If you do that, they're going to throw you out. And the people are going to be left to kufr. Don't do that. I'm enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. Guess what happened? They kicked his butt out, and those people were left to kufr. Now, how smart were you? You're not trying to distinguish between the worst of two evils. Now you can't go teach them, and now in your place, Wahhabis went and teach them and taught them, and now they believe things that are not permissible, all because you can't distinguish between two evils, if you get the point. And you forbid a lesser thing and left a greater thing. So you arguing about something that is lesser, and you trying to stop that. You didn't stop that. That remained, and the bigger evil that grew because you didn't use wisdom. This is important. And your harm you left lasts for decades after you've been gone. Because of your lack of wisdom. But you were defending the truth. This happened. I mean, it's a real true story. But that's the point. Distinguishing between two evils and distinguishing between two goods. Some people don't have that. And had you learned properly, you would have known not to do that. Okay. Way over my time. All right, I'll take a few more questions. That's an ongoing struggle for all of us. And I would say, learn the deen, learn the objectives of the sacred law with a living teacher, and inshallah, in time, we'll learn how to raise our children in Islam and also confront the world. That takes time. It's no simple 1, 2, 3 answer for that. I mean, I'm not if I lose my visa, mashallah, no problem. I mean, that's me. I mean, but I can't speak for others. Some others won't say anything, and I don't expect them to say. There are no Hajj trips, no nothing. You know, everyone's different. So I'm not going to censor someone for what they do. I'm just saying, for me, no, I'm not worried about that. I've been to Saudi Arabia a million times. If I never go back, it's not going to kill me. I would love to go see the Prophet ﷺ. I would love to go to the Kaaba, but that's not going to prevent me from speaking the truth. No, it's not. But that don't mean I'm going to be harmful either. I'm going to speak the truth, but I'm not trying to go against you. I would like us to be guided, all of us, including myself. But so I don't think it's that deep. You know, I'm not important enough anyway. I don't make a difference. Not in that scale. If I was more famous, maybe. But me, nah, I don't. Doesn't make a difference. I don't count like that. Go ahead. Good question. MashaAllah, that's a good question. With what you have planned, just a quick, well, that was two questions. That's one question altogether. Where do you see us in terms of growth a year from now? And give me the second part. With what you have planned, just a quick synopsis, inshallah. That's a beautiful question. Two things. If you follow and you study. So that's number one. There's a condition to answer your question. If we follow and study and review and memorize, right? I see us in 1 year in the foundational sciences of Islam, Aqidah, Fiqh, Tasawwuf, and some side sciences, some introductory information about it. I see us having a firm foundation in 1 year. Because if you notice, our classes are growing, our reading is growing. Every so often we're adding to, we'll have a full curriculum that people can keep up with, right? If it was left to me, I would teach you as I learned. We'd be studying every day in different sciences. But I know that's not feasible with our life, right? So, for instance, we'll be studying books in fiqh, books in Aqidah, books in Tasawwuf, books in Hadith, books in Tafsir, books in Sirah, books in Arabic language, right? Just as we're doing this, we will be doing simultaneous other books, right? A lot. Books in narration of Hadith, books in terminology of Hadith, books in Usul al-Fiqh. But do we have the aptitude in our environment for all that right now? Not right now. So you deal with the priorities. We need to learn Aqidah. We need to learn al-Fiqh, the rules of the religion. And we need to learn akhlaq and character and spirituality and how to, upgrade ourselves inside in the inward state. So these are primary sciences that we must learn. So let's work on them first. Once we finish a few books, and there is a methodology of doing that, this book, that book, which we learned very well, inshallah, through that, after 1 year, because we're going every day, it's like, you have a firm foundation. Now, when you talk about the subject, you're not guessing. You know the books, you know the scholars, you know references, you know where to find things, so you understand, right? So, for instance, in this class, you should have learned several things. Number one, you learn about the main two scholars in Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah, Imam al-Ash'ari, Imam al-Maturidi, and why they formalized their madhab, and that the top scholars agreed. So a next level would be what? Let's learn the different scholars who were major scholars in Islam who were Ash'aris or Maturidis. That's going to give you a lot of information. Let's learn their books. Let's learn where those books are taught. Let's learn the chains of narrations from ourselves back to those scholars, for instance. That's in Aqidah. Then we go to fiqh, why we follow a madhab, which madhab we follow, what are the books of that madhab, what are the reliable scholars in that madhab, what is the chain of narration from us to Imam Shafi'i or Malik or Ahmed or Abu Hanifa, for instance, right? What are the stages of learning the madhab. What is the beginner book? What is the intermediate book? What is the advanced book? What are the graduate study level books? Who are the scholars? What are their biographies? Who are they learned from? All of that. Then we switch it over to tasawwuf. Same thing. What are the books that we learn in tasawwuf? Who are these scholars? Who are the main spiritual masters in tasawwuf that everyone agree upon? What were their methodologies? What were their books? Etc. Same methodology. Now, when you got that all, we move that to hadith, we move that to fiqh. Now you understand, right? After a year of everyday studying, taking notes, reviewing, taking your time, going over the text, line for line, paragraph for paragraph, highlighting the points of the text, reviewing, getting tested, getting examined, then I would say after a year, you're going to have a sound foundational structure to build upon. So that's year 1. Then year 2, we go to the next level. Year 3, year 4, year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, till we die. We're not going to stop till we die, inshallah. So it keeps going. It doesn't stop. And then we review, we go over. Now we memorize, we master. It becomes a part of us after time. Right? So that's my, in terms of growth. We'll grow even if we all remain students, but we'll be good advanced students. And we'll be able to teach basic books and then more advanced books with our families, with our friends, or even maybe in general sessions. It works, but you got to be disciplined. You know, you have to put it in. And some people, they're not interested in it. I just want to learn how to practice my religion. And they'll get that in 1 year with ease. Because we're going to add more as we go along. Inshallah, I hope that was clear. The same way all the other scholars got hijacked by the Wahhabis. They promoted them and they cut talking about them and they attributed their vow sayings to them until people begin to think that they were him. And he followed them, same exact way. No, they say, fihi nadhar. In this statement, you need to look at it. If he meant by this, this is incorrect. If he meant this, this is the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So they butcher his statement. I'll show it to you one day when we go. Probably within the next month, we're going to revisit and finish Aqidah Tahawiyah, and I'll show you. This stuff takes time. You cannot do it overnight. Like I keep telling y'all, no microwave Islam. You can't get everything in one whop. Sayyid Abdul Rahman mentioned in his earlier class, "Men talab al-ilm jumlatan fatahu jumla." Whoever seeks knowledge all at once will lose it all at once. You can't have everything overnight. It takes time. I didn't learn what I learned yesterday. I didn't. Years, and I still got way more to learn than I know. Years. If we just go back, one sent me a picture. We were talking about the 40 hadith that we're doing on Saturday. So one of our brothers, he sent me a picture of a session with one of our teachers in the 40 hadith. I forgot all about it. And we had the books and we were studying and we did the whole 40 hadith. I forgot all about it. So when we were narrating, we were talking about from whom do we relate the 40 hadith of An-Nawawi. I mentioned this sheikh, I mentioned this sheikh, I mentioned this sheikh, and I forgot all about the other sheikh. And he's a close teacher to mine. I forgot all about it. I didn't even remember that I studied the 40 hadith with him. I forgot. So imagine how much stuff. Well, don't worry, I forget a lot now. I'm getting old, you know, you forget. That's why you got to review and you got to go over it and you got to preserve. You'll forget. I forgot all about it. And I have no recollection even what he said. And I had the book in my hand. when we were reading, I was reading with him. I forgot. I have no idea what he said. So that means go review. And maybe what I'll do is, alhamdulillah, he's my teacher. He's like a father for me. I can ask him review it with me again because I forgot everything you said. What did you just say? I was Sayyidi, I forgot. Naseed, forgot. But it happens. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. What can we do? So, inshallah, that's where we're at. I don't even remember when it was. I don't remember this. Oh, yes, I do. It was about 8, 9 years ago. I forgot. In 8 years, I forgot. SubhanAllah. 8 or 9 years ago. Alhamdulillah. But that's an example. So what about reviewing those things we forgot? Right? It happens. One of my teachers told me, the world we live in, we lucky we still memorize our names. Right? SubhanAllah. Barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, may Allah reward you all. I'm sorry for holding you so long. I hope something, what I've said is of benefit for you. And I hope, inshallah, we continue. But clean your heart. Seriously, for all of us, clean our hearts. Because most of our people, they don't understand the severity of these matters we're talking about. And we have to help them in the best way we can, you know, because it's a serious issue that we're not aware of. May Allah reward you all. Inshallah, there'll be some good programs this week coming up. Tuesday, we have the Black Imams Roundtable. How do we identify suitable husbands for the women in our communities? So we're going to have the Imams address this issue because we had the talk about our sisters. And then we're going to have later on, hopefully this week, if we can arrange it, for a group of our sisters to talk about the issue of marriage and what they face as a challenge. So maybe, if Allah facilitates, I would like to have that discussion Thursday with the sisters, just them, not with necessarily me being a part of it, just the women. And what are your perceptions, your perspectives on marriage and these issues? Because it came up, but it got cut off at the end. So we wanted the women to address that issue. And then, inshallah, by having both perspectives, we can come up with some solutions together. Because marriage is a major problem in our communities, and we need to talk about these issues and try to rectify some of the problems, because there are too many single people. And what I fear is that all these single people are constantly being tempted, and if we don't quickly help to fix the situation, we're going to have a bigger problem on our hands than we believe. So inshallah, let us come together to get a solution, because individually we probably don't have a solution. We need to work together on this, because, you know, I know my ideology of what a good husband is, but that might not work for everyone else, you know. So, you know, we need to, like I said, we got the rule, but how we apply it to the reality, you know. So inshallah, this week we'll tackle both issues if Allah gives us tawfiq. And then Friday night, we continue with our reading of Beginning of Guidance. And Saturday morning at 6 o'clock, I'll continue with our narration of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi. Assalamu alaikum. May Allah reward you. Thank you for your diligence. You have been a great group to study with, to benefit with, and I really appreciate you. And don't think I take any of your participation for granted, because you are keeping this thing going. You give me energy, because I know I have to get up, because you are waiting for me. So may Allah reward you. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.